So today we have Domaine Mugneret-Gibourg, and I have three members of the family with me. That I'm in the. It's set up so it's more at my height than theirs. But we have first of all Marie-Andree, and then Marie-Andree, and then Marie-Christine.
Hello.
And we're just missing Lucie, who is your daughter.
My daughter.
Your daughter is the daughter of Marie-Christine, who just recently had a second attack of COVID. So she's getting better, but she's preferred not to be here to spread it down the airwaves. And there is another daughter of Marie-Andree, Fanny, who is also involved in the domain. And they're just in the middle of redeveloping the house to turn it into some chambre d'hôte with top-class kitchen attached. So it could be a good place to stay in the future.
Why not?
So when will that be ready?
Yes, okay.
Yes,
okay.
Soon. Yeah.
So we are very happy to share this moment with you. So I am Marie-Andree, and I work with Marie-Christine, my sister, for 33 years now, after the death of our father. We are the third generation. The domain has been founded by our grandparents. And with the name, I can explain now the name of the domain, because the domain is Domaine Georges Mugneret-Gibourg. Mugneret was our grandfather, André Mugneret, and his wife, Jeanne Gibourg. When they arrived when my grandmother arrived in the family, decided to work the vine with my grandfather. So they decided to found the domain Mugneret-Gibourg. They had only son, Georges, our father, and our father was a good student at school, and he studied school in Vosne-Romanée with a lot of good friends with names that you know, Jean Griveaux, Henri Liger-Belair, Jean Méot. They were from the same generation. And the teacher of the village was the abbé of the village. And this abbé said to the parents, your son are good at school, so I think it's interesting for them to study in Dijon, in Paris. So my father, Georges Mugneret, studied medicine in Dijon, and he became an ophthalmologist. So, and our grandparents were very happy, because in the 50s, the work of the vine was very, very difficult. So they were happy to imagine that their son had a good job. So, but he always keep his art in the vineyard, and he decided to continue the work of his father. And when he was medicine student, he had the opportunity to buy a parcel of Clos Vougeot. The parcel, we will have a Clos Vougeot to taste at the end of the tasting. And he founded the domain Georges Mugneret. In 2009, we decided with my mother and my sister to regroup the two domains, Georges Mugneret and Mugneret-Gibourg, in just one name, Domaine Georges Mugneret-Gibourg. So it's a long name on the label, but it's important to explain you that, because before 2009, you can find some label with just Mugneret-Gibourg or Georges Mugneret. It depends on the appellation. And after 2009, you have the same label for all our appellation, Domaine Georges Mugneret-Gibourg. Today, we are very happy because our daughters decided to work with us. Because Marie-Christine has two daughters and I have two daughters. And on our four daughters, three are working with us now. So Lucie arrived in 17. And Marion and Fanny, my daughters, arrived 3 years ago. So now the new generation is with us. We are very happy because they arrived with new idea, of course, but I think that they want to continue the tradition in the family.
That's right.
So it's girl power here since what, from 1928 until a couple of years ago. No boys in the family.
Absolutely, no. Absolutely. It's the destiny because as our father died very young because he was 59 years old. The question was how we able to continue, and my mother Jacqueline, who is a very important person in the domain, was very courageous and decided to continue with Marie-Christine. And before Marie-Christine, we have 9 years of difference. And Marie-Christine was pharmacist when my father died. And Marie-Christine decided to stop to work in pharmacy to come in the domain. And 33 years later, we are always here, vintage after vintage.
Great. So we are going to look at some younger wines. We've got of several of the vineyards. I think we have the 2017 and the 2015 first, and we have those wines open as well. So we'll taste them along with you at the same time. It's perhaps worth saying also that in the earlier days, and still a bit today, you have some sharecroppers running some of the vineyards for you.
We still have one sharecropper whose name is Pascal Mugneret from Domaine Georges Mugneret. In fact, Gérard is the cousin of my grandfather. And we still share a plot of Vosne-Romanée called Le Pré de la Folie and a plot of Echezeaux called Les Quartiers de Nuits. So it represents about 1 hectare in total.
In total, yes.
And so we have good relationship with him. So he takes care about the vineyard all the year long, and we share the harvest. It's 50-50, and we share it in grapes. So each of us makes our own wines, in fact.
And prior to that, there was another sharecropper called Fabrice Vigo, who then decided that he wanted to retire. He didn't get kicked out, but he left of his choice, and those grapes have come back to the family.
Yeah. So the vintage 14, 16, and 15 that you will, and 16 also, that you will taste is part of this sharecropping on Vosne-Romanée and Echezeaux.
We need one more glass. Okay, so I think you've got 4 pairs by the look of it. Pardon, je vais me servir. Okay. So starting with the 2017 Vosne-Romanée. Now you're familiar with the vintage, of course, because we've had it together many times with different producers. But I will ask either Marion or Marie-Andree just to give a view on 2017 at the domain.
So 2017 was an early vintage because the harvest was at the beginning of September. But for us, it's not a solar vintage; it's a real classical vintage because the summer was not very hot and not too much dry. We had enough rain. So for this vintage 17, it's for us a really classical vintage.
So the Vosne-Romanée that you're tasting, we have 4 different plots which are harvested in the same day. So first we have La Colombière, which is now just an only cuvée from 2018, but in 2017 you still had La Colombière in the cuvée of Vosne-Romanée. This is an old vine because it's now 90 years old. Then straight away you have Les Chambolle. This is just next to La Colombière, and Le Pré de la Folie, which is a young vine because it was replanted in 2011 after the frost of 2009. So in 17, it was a really young vine. And so we have 5% of the cuvée, which is from a small plot called Les Chalandins. This is just at the entry of Vosne-Romanée after Vougeot. And we have 15% of la cuvée, which is from La Croix Blanche, just before Nuit Saint-Georges. So we have different types of terroir in Vosne-Romanée on this cuvée.
And what I love about this wine, in common with other 17s, is how delicious the aromatics are right from the start. So no problem to drink this now. Good acidity as well. So that will go better with food than having it on its own. But that's sort of ready to go. And in common with most of the wines, we'll say if it's not true for all of them, but in common with most of the wines, it's 100% destemmed.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
And then, so vinified with natural yeasts.
Natural yeast.
Yeah. And anything else about the vinification you'd like to add?
It's really classic. Sorry. The vinification is really classic. So it starts with natural yeast. The vinification lasts about between 15 and 20 days. Mm-hmm. So firstly, we just make remontage. And when the fermentation is at its peak, we use also pigeage once a day. But it's really smooth because it's handmade, so it's not too much.
Yes, I mean, your wines have never been powerful like these wines. Always
and particularly the Vosne-Romanée, we try to have a very elegant appellation village because we have in Vosne-Romanée we have a lot of fineness, so we want to keep this fineness and this red fruit.
So the blend is representative of everything that from north to south.
Yes.
But you don't have the vineyards right up at the top of the hill.
No, no.
Okay. So let's look at the 15 alongside. If anyone's got any questions, don't hesitate, but do make sure you've got the little speaking thing very close to you.
Jasper, just a quick question, please. There's the Vosne-Romanée village, and there's a Vosne-Romanée village. Is it Ludi that they also make?
Only very recently, yes.
Yes.
That's the Colombia since then.
Yes, because the sharecropping stopped in 2016. We decided with the nice production we had in 2018 to separate the production of the lieu-dit La Colombière. So it's a Vosne-Romanée village, but lieu-dit La Colombière, it's an old parcel, approximately 90, yes, but
it's your garden. It's your garden, effectively.
It's our garden. It's around now we can say 80 years old. So it's very interesting for the vinification to separate the Vosne-Romanée with different plots and the Vosne-Romanée La Colombière. But the first vintage was in 2018. So 2015.
So now we have the 15, which for us here is a little deeper in color, certainly a little bit more concentrated
yes.
in bouquet, but not as, it doesn't sort of come leaping out of the glass. It's more reserved, I find. That's true. We had the 17 out of a half bottle and the 15 out of a bottle, just in case that makes a difference.
Yes, because we have no more bottle of 17 in the cellar. Sorry. So
There's a greater weight of sweet and slightly darker fruit here. Yum, yum. But still the same acidity too.
yes.
So I could drink the 17 now, but I'd rather wait for the 15.
Exactly, because we have for the harvest the date was approximately the same, so beginning of September, and we were very happy with nice production, and but we early knew we will have a lot of a good structure of tannin with this vintage.
By the way, I just asked about how the vineyards are now, if the flowering went well. There was a good grape set. The flowering did go well, not too hot, not too windy. and looking for a harvest. Might be the end of August, might be the beginning of September, but touch wood everywhere. It's promising.
Yes.
Jasper, what's the production for the village wine?
For this vintage, was a small production. We didn't accident, but
at the moment of the flowering, it was a solar year, so the heat we lost by the heat.
Yes. Do you happen to remember how many barrels you made?
I have
Right.
Vosne-Romanée, 2015. Yes, but we have a sharecropping, so it was difficult to. But for Vosne-Romanée, it was okay. The problem was more for the Premier Cru and Grand Cru.
At that point, before separating out Colombière, they had about just under 4 hectares, 3.6 hectares of village Vosne-Romanée. But remembering that a fair amount of that, not all of it, they'd have to give 50% back.
50%, yes.
So you haven't got an exact answer, I'm afraid, but a few things to work on.
We are actually approximately around 40 hectoliters per hectare.
Okay.
Yes, and so totally distant as well. And for the Vosne-Romanée, we use approximately 25% of new oak, and we have 4 different coopers because we want to have different touch of oak. So for us, it's interesting to blend different oak, different barrels, different new barrels.
But it's all light and middle toast.
Yes, all middle toast because with our structure of wine, it's not good to have a very high toast.
I have to say those 2 wines for me are quintessential Vosne-Romanée. I mean, when you all take your Master of Wine exams in future years, you get served those, you should be able to nail the commune. Okay, so the Domaine doesn't have much in the way of Premier Crus. It's more Grand Crus, lucky people. Later on, you're going to taste the 2 Premier Crus, Chaignots and Feusselottes. So there's a tiny bit of Vigneronde as well. But the main ones you'll see are the Feusselottes from Chambolle and the Chaignots from Domaine Georges. But in these younger wines, we're now going to look at the 3 Grand Crus, beginning with the 2017 Echezeaux. So you have 2 plots, 2 parcels.
Yes. So remember, the Echezeaux are coming from the Domaine Mugneret-Gibourg because our grandparents bought 2 plots of Echezeaux, one on slope. The name of this lieu-dit is Les Rouges du Bas, but it's really on slope. And the second one, Les Quartiers de Nuits, more flat, just below the wall of Clos Vougeot. And the harvests are always on the same day, so we put the grapes of these 2 parcels on the same van to have only 1 cuvée of Echezeaux, but we blend at the beginning.
So previously, Fabrice Vigo did the upper one, Les Rouges du Bas,
yes.
and Pascal Mineret the lower one. Yeah. So now you get back a bit more, at any rate. It's no longer 50-50 now, it's more...
yes, but you know, with the small production we had with 1920, the proportion of are
not
so good.
Yes, only the same.
So this is the only appellation at the Domaine where we have a part of all bunch harvest since 2016. Because in fact, in 2016, we suffered from frost and we didn't have enough volume in the vat to start a good fermentation. I mean, to work easily in the vat, so to make remontage, pigeage, and so on. So we decided to put a percentage of all cluster. So it represents about 20% of all bunches. And we made it again until 2020 because 21 was the clusters were clearly not ready. But this is the only cuvée where some things change in the recent years.
It's got that openness of 2017,
Yes.
but also, again, more, I don't want to say power with Echezeaux, because what I like about Echezeaux is the detail that you have in the wine that just keeps sort of moving around on your palate. It's very hard to single out one specific flavor profile. It's the quality of the detail, I think, which makes Echezeaux so special.
And the blending of these two plots are the blending is interesting because the soil is different, the age is different because the plot les Quartiers de Nuits is younger than the parcel les Rouges du Bas. Les Rouges du Bas is a very old parcel. So I think it's interesting to put together at the beginning these two parcels.
The earth is also more rich on les Quartiers de Nuits than on les Rouges du Bas. On les Rouges du Bas, you just have very small rocks, what we called couscous, because you have, yeah, it's couscous, because you have just really small rocks, but also a lot of red earth, and it makes a really aéré, how do you say
Aerated.
Aerated soil, so which is really interesting for the roots of the vine stocks.
And Rouge du Bas. And Rouge du Bas means red at the bottom, but red because the earth, the soil is it's red. It's a very special the soil.
Because of iron.
Yes, iron. Yes.
Yes. And we can find this vintage always elegant. A lot of fineness of this vintage. It's not a very powerful vintage, but elegant.
You get that little tingle on the palate and a little bit of the sort of crushed strawberries, which to me are signs of having a percentage of the whole bunch. So you're not tempted to do more whole bunch in the future in the domain?
Why not?
Huh?
Maybe for more technical reason than how can I say that the taste, which should be different, but adding some old cluster in the vat brings more freshness, above all in hot vintages, but it's also like a natural drain in the press when you want to press your wines. But for the moment, wait and see.
Yes.
We tried something new in 2021 on les Chaignots. Again, for the same problem, we thought we had enough volume in the vat to put all the bunches, all the berries in the vat, and we didn't have enough. So we decided to put, it's a big word to say that we tried vendange pédonculée, but we tried to put out just a big part of the cluster, of the stem, that's right, and we kept just the pedicel and the berries. So
It's a very long word.
It's very long. It's becoming quite popular at the moment. There's one domain that in 21 did it for the entire crop in Vosne-Romanée, and
just half a day.
exactly. They had more people actually helping them do that in the winery than they had picking the grapes in the first place. Okay, so the interesting contrast then with the 2015 Echezeaux is that has not got any of the whole bunch.
Yes.
So we're back to classic Mugneret-Gibourg.
Jasper, we're seeing now more and more all the positive things you talked about in the 2015 vintage finally starting to come through in these tastings.
Yes, I still don't want to be in a hurry to drink them, but it's comforting to see that everything is heading in the right direction. And that my idea of 2015 is it's like in mathematics, it's 5 plus 10. So you have the intensity of 2005 and the charm of 2010 together. Voila.
Nice.
And anyway, it's all happening. So once again, the color is just that bit more dense and that little bit darker and deeper.
And something interesting in this solar year, it's now we have very good level of acidity. For us, the vintage 08 was a frontier between the vintage with very low acidity and vintage with a lot of acidity. And of course, we have more and more vintages with a lot of sun, with dryness. And if we can compare this kind of vintage with, for example, the 03, it was completely different because it was our first vintage with such a hot temperature and a big lack of rain. But the acidity was not the same than now.
Very low.
Very low. Why we have good acidity now is just because we work differently with the fertilizer in the vineyard. During the 80s and the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, we use a lot of potassium to add in the vineyard because our grandparents had a lack of potassium, and we needed to have a good production and a good vegetation. We needed that, but we learn about mistake, of course, of our mistakes. We understood after that we have too much, so we completely stopped to put potassium after the 90s. Mm-hmm. But of course, the soil needs a lot of time to adapt itself. And at the middle of the year 2000, we have the effect of this stop of potassium, and the balance in the wine is right now. Just because when you have a lot of potassium in the soil, of course, the plants absorb the potassium. And when we put the grapes in the vat, there is a reaction between the potassium and the tartric acid. And the effect of the tartric acid was cancelled. And you have a very high pH. And it's not interesting. Now we have the very good balance that I think it's very important with the weather condition of the last vintages.
I think most domains in Burgundy went through this period of too much potassium and moving away. Mm-hmm. It happened at different times maybe, but it's a lesson to learn. The pendulum swings and everybody thinks one direction is the right way to go. And then help, stop. You have to move back, and sometimes too far back the other way.
And of course, I think that in our job, the evolution in the vinification will not be very different than year after year, because our way of vinification is very classic. But all the work and all what we can discover in the work of the culture is very, very important. And we are just at the beginning of the knowledge. And the problem is, it's when you take a decision for your vineyard 1 year, you have the effect 3, 4, 5 years after. So we need a lot of patience to work in the vineyard.
But also that's why it's comforting that now in 2022, what we're tasting in 2015 is what we thought we were going to taste when we first tried the wines.
But I think it will be, the work of the vineyard will be the challenge for the next generation.
Yes.
Yes.
Ready for that, Marie-Andree?
I'm supposed to, yeah.
Yes.
So
it's very interesting.
Did all three of you, four with Lucy, did you all actually go officially to wine school, or did you learn at the Domaine?
No, so we had the chance to not to be pushed by our mothers to run the Domaine over, because some of our colleagues were like, okay, do you want to work in the vineyard now? But we didn't, so we didn't have any pressure. So that's why we made all different studies. So Clémence, who is not working there, but she's my cousin, so the sister of Lucy, she's a lawyer. Lucy is an engineer in the food industry. My sister made studies in hostelry, and I made a business school in Reims, so in the Champagne region. And I have a master's degree in wine and champagne, but we studied more business management and also enology. And to run a domain in France, you have to have a special degree or diploma in agriculture. So that's why the three girls went to make studies in Beaune. So Lucie was in Dijon, but Fanny and I were at Lycée Viticole in Beaune in 2020 during COVID. And so we have to have more studies about viticulture and more on the scientific points of viticulture.
Lovely. So that's for Echezeaux. Shall we look at the Clos Vougeot next?
Yes.
Tiens, tu vas passer derrière, ça sera plus facile.
So how many different plots, parcelles, have you got in Clos Vougeot?
Not a lot.
No.
Just one.
Just one. It's the first parcel that our father bought during his medicine studies. So I'm not sure that today medicine student
Has enough money to buy.
has to buy. So
Yes.
it's
But at that time, it was also quite cheap.
yes, it
Yes.
was yes, but we are very lucky because the parcel that our father chose is not in a bad place in the Clos Vougeot, we can say.
Just
We-
below the
Yes,
the
we
castle.
are just close to the door of the castle of Clos Vougeot. We have 1/3 of hectare. And he bought it in 1953 and he replanted it in 1954. So, and we always work with the same vine. We didn't replant for the moment, and we don't want because it's a very consistent vineyard. And I think that the quality of the plant that my father chose was very, very nice. And we try to make massal selection
Out of these vines.
yes, yes.
But I think you get that as soon as you smell this. I think you get an idea of the finesse of the Pinot plant, because we all know that in general, Clos Vougeot is thought of as being maybe a little bit less elegant than some of the Grand Cru, depending on maybe where you are. But here we've got the finesse that we want right from the first smell. And of course, we're back in 2017, but no stems for Clos Vougeot.
No.
No.
Yes, but it's a very consistent parcel. Of course, when you have hail or frost, we reduce the production, but it's a very resistant plant because the disease, when we have odium or mildew, they are not very sensitive. So it's I call this parcel a magic place.
Yes. This is really exquisite for Clos Vougeot, I think, particularly for a young one, because normally you do have to wait 10 years or so before all the flavors.
But to answer to your question, we can say that we always, it's important to have dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know a few people who've got more than they need. Well, they won't see it that way, but alongside it, instead of the 15, we have the 14.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's a slightly trickier vintage. Be interesting to hear the family's views on how 2014 went. So is the Clos Vougeot then was never sharecropped? That's always always run by the family.
Yes.
Okay. Because it was your father.
Jasper, we've just been tasting and talking about the 14. I think this is, we are positively surprised by the quality of the 14 because we've been having some 14s in our previous Zooms.
Yeah.
And it's a, like you said, it's a difficult vintage, but this one is tasting wonderfully.
That's good to hear. So we've only just poured
Yes.
it. I mean, the color, you think about the other wines, we've had the 15, and the color of the 15 is so youthful. And the 14, you're now seeing a little bit of evolution. It's beginning to move on, as is only right. But I'm getting a very good bouquet. Again, a tiny bit more evolved, obviously, than the 17. So the issue in 14 that we talked about before was the arrival of rot, partly because of the Drosophile, the fruit fly,
Yes.
the famous Suzuki.
Suzuki, yes.
So some people may have suffered too much from the rot, and other people may have panicked and picked it too early in order to avoid the rot. So how did you react?
The reaction at the domain was to go on the vine, to cut and to put out of the vine the bad bunches.
Because you could smell, couldn't you?
It was awful. It was awful. It's why we decided to pick up and to put out of the vine. And we have some quantities, but we can wait longer before the harvest.
We wait for the maturity.
Yes.
Good maturity.
I think that's essential because it's very clear where people did panic and pick too early, and
Yes.
wines
And
not good.
we had a lot of work because we had a sort of two harvest, but I think it was necessary.
And the vine which were affected was the vine more affected was the vine close to the village, because we explained this my idea to explain sorry, I don't. Sorry.
It's because the fruit fly has started in people's gardens.
Because 14 was a very early year, and a lot of fruit like cherries, like plums, were very early. And I think that Drosophila Suzuki are in the garden each year,
everywhere.
But they didn't had at this moment, beginning of September, fruit to go to put their eggs inside. So they went to the grapes, and especially the vine close to the gardens, close to the house, were affected. For example, our parcel of La Colombière had a lot of concentration of Drosophila. It's why in this place we made not a green harvest, because it was not green harvest, but a first early harvest to pull out the grapes, the bad grapes. With
well, you got it right. That's a beautiful wine, and it's freshening up in the glass, isn't it? It's getting more depth and more freshness with time in the glass.
Yes,
a very classical vintage for Burgundy. We have the expression of Pinot without too much concentration, and it's the expression of the terroir.
So
could drink now or could keep another several years, no hurry.
For the Clos Vougeot, we can keep a little,
yes,
maybe 3-4 years. And we open this bottle now. It's for 2 hours, and the difference of the nose is very, very important. Yes.
And I think Sebastian did the same thing. I think
So,
he opened about 2 hours
it's,
before the start. Yes.
Okay.
And
important.
you have another thing, you have the travel between Burgundy and Hong Kong. And when we travel, for example, in United States, when we have a tasting of the new vintage in our cellar and in a tasting in New York, we are very surprised, because generally the wines are more ready, more evaluate when they cross ocean, or where they traveled. Yes.
Good. So the last of the Grand Crus is the Ruchottes-Chambertin, and I love this wine, and I love the story about it as well. So you have 2 vintages. We in fact only have one, because the other one was missing. I'm just trying to remember which one.
14.
Right. So we have the 16, but not the 14.
So we are
recommend the 14.
Yes, and we are waiting for your comments on the 14, because we
no more on the cellar.
Okay, so we have to have the story because it's one of my favorite stories in Burgundy. So you can say it in French if it's easier, and I can translate. But the origin is that Domaine Rousseau had the chance to buy a big parcel of Ruchottes-Chambertin. And then, whether or not this bit is true, but Mrs. Rousseau said to her husband, "You can't go on spending money on vines like this." And so he shared it round. 1/3 ended up with the Roumiers, so not as ownership, and the third came to you.
Yes.
And you got the family around, and voila.
Yes, it was a very nice history, because Charles Rousseau and Jacqueline Rousseau are very close friends to our parents, and this parcel of Ruchottes comes from a domain which name was Domaine Thomas Bassot, and they stopped their activity in 1977. And Ruchottes-Chambertin is not a very large appellation. And Thomas Bassot,
3 hectares.
3 hectares and
3.3 hectares.
3.3 hectares, and the Domaine Thomas Bassot had a little more of 2 hectares. So it was the most important part of the Ruchottes. And as Jasper explained, Charles Rousseau said, "Okay, I buy." And Jacqueline said, "Okay, you work too much, and if you have these 2 hectares more, I will not see you oftenly, so you have to find some friend to share with you." So he had a friend who share and give. He was not Mr. Bonnefond, a good friend of Charles Rousseau, bought one small part, and he gave in métayage, in fermage, to Christophe Roumier. And Christophe Roumier is always the winemaker of this parcel. And after Charles Rousseau came to speak to our father, and he said, "You have to help me. You have time to decide. You have time. You have 24 hours." So my father didn't hesitate, and we are very lucky to have this parcel of Ruchottes-Chambertin in our family. And it's always a good reason to have tasting. We share tasting with Éric Rousseau and Christophe Roumier to speak about the terroir of Ruchottes. Christophe and Éric are in les Ruchottes du Dessus, because there is 2 parcels in the Ruchottes-Chambertin. And in les Ruchottes du Dessus, you have the Clos des Ruchottes, and Clos des Ruchottes is the monopoly of Charles Rousseau. And we are in les Ruchottes du Bas, and
just below the Clos.
Yes,
right?
yes. And the Ruchottes is a very interesting terroir of Chambertin. And one day, Henri Jaillet came in the cellar to have a tasting and to speak with us, because Henri Jaillet was a really fantastic winemaker, but a great man, and it was very important for us to share a moment with him.
So we were very impressed.
Yes, he said, he wanted to taste with us in the cellar. And we tasted the Vosne-Romanée, the Nuit Saint-Georges, Echezeaux. And when we arrived to the Ruchottes-Chambertin, he tasted and he said, "It's a Chambertin, but made in Vosne-Romanée." And we found that this description is very nice, because he wanted to explain that, of course, we have the terroir of Gevrey, but maybe at the end of Vosne-Romanée in the winemaking. And of course, as we work with natural yeast, the environment of the winery is important. And we think that the terroir of Ruchottes-Chambertin, it's a very fine terroir, we have enough structure, but it's not a strong wine. We always have delicatesse and finesse.
I think there is a relationship between the style of Ruchottes-Chambertin and the style of Echezeaux, but not Clos Vougeot. That's another
Absolutely,
thing.
yes.
Marie-Christine, I thought you told me a story once that you had, maybe it was family members rather than Monsieur Jaillet, when they said c'est un très bon vin, mais c'est pas de chez nous.
Yes, yes, because when our father bought the parcel, the first vintage was 1977, so it was bad vintage. Not
famous vintage.
Not famous vintage, but it was the first vintage of Ruchotte in the cellar, and my father was very
Close to
anxious, and he wanted to have the opinion of his father and his uncle, and he said in October, 1 month after the after we put in barrels, he said, "Come with me to taste the new baby of the family," because you know when we have a new parcel in a domain, it's like a new baby. And so the grandfather and the uncle taste. They said nothing, and after 4 minutes, they said, "It's not a wine from our country. It's not. Ce n'est pas un vin de chez nous. It's not our country." Because you know, my grandfather and my grand-uncle were born in Vosne-Romanée, and so for them to have vines in Ruchottes-Chambertin, it's a very, very long trip.
Shocking.
And they were a little bit shocking. So for them, it was very special. It was like étranger,
Foreign wine.
Foreign, yes, it was nearly foreign wine. But my father was very surprised about this reaction. But for old winemakers, it was a normal reaction.
Yes, because for the generation of our grandparents, as they went to the vineyard by foot or by a bicycle or
with horses.
Generally, the maximum of area of a vineyard was 2 kilometers around the domain. So, of course,
8 kilometers to go to Ruchottes-Chambertin, it's a long
really
trip.
too far.
So that Ruchotte 16, I mean, it shows just how good this 16 vintage can be in red, where the frost has reduced the quantities, but doesn't seem to have changed the quality.
The problem was really with the Chambolle Musigny, because we lost in Chambolle Musigny Premier Cru les Feusselottes, we lost 90%. We had only 1 barrels. Normally it's 10, so it was terrible. But in Ruchotte, the damage was not so strong. Yes.
Yes, we lost, I think, 20%.
20%,
so it was correct.
Still very young and intense, and such a quality of fruit.
Actually, just on that point, if you could expand a little bit on the Feusselottes 2016, is it correct these are only available in magnums?
Yes, and we have a story for this wine because it was the first time we had so much damage in a parcel, and the first time in Chambolle Musigny les Feusselottes. And it was the first time we had a boy in the family because Lucy, second children, it was Augustin, it was a boy. So Augustin was born in November. And so we said, only 1 barrel of Chambolle Musigny, the first boy in the family. So we will make only Magnum with this barrel of Chambolle, and on the label we can read Cuvée Augustin, because we were very proud with this first boy. And then the history can show us we had three boys.
Three boys now.
We have
Four boys.
and now we have 4 boys in the family.
So
2 with Lucy and 2 with Marion. So we are very proud.
we are very proud grandmother.
Yes. So, but only Magnum with Chambolle Musigny 2016.
Yes, it's true.
Okay. So how's the 14 Ruchottes?
Very good.
Very good.
It is excellent.
Very, very good.
I would actually say it's a notch ahead of the Clos Vougeot. I know
Yes.
what other people.
Well, that was pretty fabulous already. So that's
Really
encouraging news. Guys, save some of these wines for my next trip to Hong Kong so I can share them with you and sit and drink them rather than just enjoy a taste.
Jasper,
Yeah.
Jasper, I was desperately trying to find a Magnum of the 2016 Feusselottes. If you're next coming to Hong Kong, would you mind bringing one with you since you're at the Domaine?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yes, next time you're over, we'll make this a visit, come and take, we'll share one here at the Domaine.
We
There's
can
an
open
idea.
one in La Maison de Jacqueline.
Absolutely.
La Maison de Jacqueline will be the
Next year.
house of the Domaine. So,
Actually, I have a question, Jasper. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'd just like to ask, is this the order that we've been served these wines? The 3 Grand Cru, we've had Echezeaux, Clos Vougeot, Ruchottes-Chambertin in that order. Is that always the order that they're shown in tastings at the Domaine?
l'ordre de
De
dégustation.
dégustation entre les 3.
So always,
Is it always kind of Echezeaux, Clos Vougeot, Ruchottes? Is that the kind of...
Generally, we follow the order that our father decided. It was Echezeaux, Ruchottes, and Clos Vougeot.
in the second.
But now the Clos Vougeot, as the vineyard is older, I think that the Clos Vougeot now shows itself more younger than 20 years ago. So, but generally, when you come in the cellar, we always do Echezeaux, Ruchottes-Chambertin, and Clos Vougeot.
And which strikes me as being logical for the style of the vineyards, but I think it's because we had 2017 of Echezeaux and of Clos Vougeot, but we didn't of Ruchottes, is why we chose that order.
Yes.
Why I chose that order. I think it was me. So if it's the wrong order, it's all my fault. No, never mind. So should we maybe just talk a little bit about the remaining wines which they will taste, if you have the list?
Yes, for the
Yeah.
dinner.
So over dinner, you will have
Nuit Saint-Georges, les Chaignots 05. So 05, it's a very concentrated vintage. So I think it's the good moment to drink now because yes, it's 17 years. 17 years, I think.
just starting.
There is a long time that we didn't open an 05, but it was a kind the vintage solar vintage because the weather in 05 was not very hot but very dry, and I think it's the quality of the grapes that we had in 05. It is one of the best. It was the best grapes that we had.
Yes.
We of course we used the sorting table, but we can keep the hand in our pocket and just we have a look on the grapes on the sorting table, but no rot, no dry berries. It was a very nice vintage.
And Chaignots is Premier Cru, just close to Vosne-Romanée. It's not on the south of Nuit Saint-Georges, it's on the north of Nuit Saint-Georges. So it's, of course, we have the structure of the Nuit Saint-Georges, but we can remember some accent of Vosne-Romanée, you understand? So Chaignots is always round, elegant, and I think for this vintage, it's the moment to appreciate.
Next is the
Chambolle, Musigny, Premier Cru, les Feusselottes, 1999. large production. It was very, I can remember this vintage, it was wonderful.
Yes, a lot of that everywhere in the winery. And we were very impressed by the quantity, by the quality, because we did green harvest during summer, but all the conditions were very good, and we understand very quickly that this large production will arrive to the right maturity, and we were lucky. But of course, we always said we have to wait a long time to appreciate it. So I hope that you will spend a good moment with this Chambolle.
It's actually a vintage that's never quite shut down, but you've always been aware that there was a lot more still to come. So that should be in a good place. So any particular characteristic behind that vineyard, the Feusselottes vineyard?
Very consistent,
yes.
Parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Except
more clay or more limestone?
We have some, because we have, sorry. Yes, we have a small hole at the middle of the parcel. So of course the soil is a little it's less deeper than at the top of the parcel, and the plant is the kind of grapes is very consistent. And of course, Chambolle is always very delicate, straight wine, lacy, dentelle, lacy. So in 1999, there is a long time that we didn't open one.
We don't have any more.
No, I don't think that we. Maybe one Jeroboam.
Perhaps, yes.
Maybe.
So you guys in Hong Kong, if you do come over here, and you better bring some Chambolle Musigny Feusselottes 99 with you.
Then Ruchottes-Chambertin 05. So we spoke about Ruchottes. We spoke about 05. So the deal could be interesting.
So Echezeaux 01. 01 is a very interesting vintage now, because 10 years ago, I preferred 02, but now the evolution of 01 is very interesting. And I tasted 1 month ago a Clos Vougeot 01, so it was not an Echezeaux, but for me, it was the very good moment to taste, to appreciate this vintage. Because when he was young, it was a little bit, un peu pointu.
A little bit angular.
Yeah, angular, exactly. Yes. And now it's round, yes.
98. Complicated.
Very complicated. Very complicated.
A lot of structure, powerful tannin.
You needed the table de tri, the sorting table.
Yes.
Yes. But it was a very difficult vintage for journalists to explain during the tasting on the barrels. But I think, of course, we always understand that we have to wait like 99. But the bottle that we opened of 98 was always were always interesting. So we hope that you will not be disappointed. But in Clos Vougeot, I think it could be nice.
I spent some time on the sorting table with Philippe Angel in 98, and I had to throw out some bunches because they were rotten, some bunches because they weren't ripe, and some bunches because they got grilled.
Yes,
but if you took that trouble, you can make really nice wine.
Yes, absolutely.
And then 93, the special vintage that wasn't much talked about at the time, but since then.
The first vintage we had the sorting table, because we decided to buy this sorting table for this vintage, because we had a problem with mildew.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's why we decided to buy and now we use
and
everywhere.
and-
For each vintage, we use the sorting table.
And it was a very special year because generally when we have mildew, early mildew, like we had in 93, so at the beginning of June, generally when the mildew is on bunches of grape, the bunches die. But in 93, it was very strange because just generally half of the part of the bunches died. So it was a dry part of the fruit. And with Christine, we said, no, it was not possible to put, to let the attacked bunches on the vine because we will lost a lot of production, but it's not possible to put dry berries in the vat. So the only solution was the sorting table, and it's why we make the investment, and we always work with
and we decided to buy the sorting table in June, I remember, and it was possible.
Yes,
it was not yet. Now
in September. No.
Yes, now it's not possible to have anything. We need 6 months to have.
Yes, and for example, we are waiting now for the bottle, the empty bottle, to finish the bottling of 2020 because we don't have enough bottle because the production in some industries are stopped.
So, yes, I was in Chablis about 10 days ago, and some domains said we've had to put off bottling our 2020 because we can't get the bottles, and some other domains said, no, we bought enough for 5 years. So,
Yes.
What do you want? You have got your dinner awaiting you, and you have another 7 or 8 wines, which I'm sure will be lovely. I look forward to the reports back. But we will leave you in peace. But I just want to reiterate that this has been a really astonishingly fine tasting. So big thank you.
Since we have 3 family members, it would be wonderful to get each one's opinion. If money was no object and you could buy any vineyard in Burgundy, which one would you want to add to the domain?
Alors vas-y, Christine, toi.
I have the same dream of my sister, a part of Musigny.
Yes.
And perhaps Marion?
I think I would have to have a Vosne-Romanée Premier Cru because maybe we missed it in the range of products.
But which one?
Which one? Malconsa would be nice because
yes,
it's the same range as our new vintage.
Very.
Not very apparent.
That's a very good choice. Very good choice.
Maybe you can ask to Frédéric Meunier for one vintage. We can exchange Ruchottes-Chambertin and Musigny, or Clos Vougeot in Musigny. He could make Clos Vougeot and we can make Musigny. It could be an idea.
Oh.
Yes.
So my worst nightmare would be to make a white wine because it seems to be difficult because you just can control 3 aspects. I mean, press, the kind of grapes, and
the
barrel, and then not easy for us.
But if we have the opportunity to make a Morachet, maybe we have to train us before with other
great wines.
Yes, we have very good friends.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure the next generation can become an expert in whites. Anyway, so thank you again, everybody, Sebastian, all the team, and the restaurant, and thank you all for turning up.
And bon appétit.
Yeah, absolutely. Et là, je soif.
Thank you.
Wow.